Okay, for our second segment, we are going to be reading character descriptions. So, this is kind of how I have it laid out just while I write everything. Book three's title is Miramana. So, like I said, each of the books are going to be titled after a great weapon, and Miramana is probably my favorite. The weapons are special, so enjoy. We are going to start out with our hero, of course, right? So, one of my favorite ever D&D characters that didn't necessarily inspire like this was actually a world I made for a D&D campaign or Tunnels and Trolls. And it's just been something that like the story's been floating around in my head forever. Well, Merrick and Calder anyways. But then I made this a D&D character, and just from writing for everybody else and doing things for others, I finally want to do something for myself. Something out of my own head and not the ideals of others. So, my character Callum kind of inspired that for me to actually take that first step. He was a character that we got the campaign. He lived the entire time. Um, he did some questionable things, some great things. So I'm not going to necessarily write him as I played him, but it definitely inspired the character and just for me to write. I loved the character. We'll just say that, right? So, without any more ado, Callum Lecramvic was born into the Lecramvic house on a thunderous night to the Lord and Grand Master Sorcerer Calder Lecramvic and the Lady Alibi. The Lecramvic line is a long lineage of sorcerers that have served the lords to the city of Ceylon. Ceylon is the second district in the country of Valise. Valise is a prosperous country ruled by the just king Merrick Glass. Callum's father Calder and King Merrick grew up as children. King Merrick, only having daughters, often regarded Callum as his son. Callum does not share the traits or characteristics of his father and was an unsuccessful sorcerer from a young age. King Merrick took Callum under his wing, and Callum, being that he had some magical background, was trained as a Tulusian knight by King Merrick himself. The king, even with his magically extended age, was always worried about the lack of male heir to the throne. King Merrick decisively chose Callum to wed his eldest daughter, Mary. He selected Callum over Callum's younger brother, Cormac. Cormac was wise, crafty, careful, and a very talented sorcerer, just like his father. Callum was strong, brave, and just, and sometimes rather brash. Callum was not typically good with words and was better at taking action. Cormac was very good at manipulating situations to his advantage and an excellent diplomat. The brothers were opposite as day and night, and Merrick worried and knew that there was too much Calder in Cormac. Calder was sometimes cruel and unjust, but he had saved Merrick's life on several occasions. Calder had also shared with Merrick his secret of extending life. So Merrick often ignored Calder's minor indiscretions, as he had been somewhat good the last 50 years. However, to appease Calder, Merrick agreed to send both Cormac and Callum on a quest. They were each to bring back something, of great value, a gift for a king. And based on the value of the gift, Callum would decide who his daughter would wed. Callum was not thrilled about the proposal of marriage, but he agreed so that he could see the world. He had no desire to be a king or a prince. He liked the idea of adventure and exploration. He wanted to see the world outside Valise, live his life to the fullest. He never doubted himself and never regretted doing something on a whim or even enjoying female company. In Valise, it was normal for lords and nobles to consort with beautiful women. However, Callum did not follow the class rules, which was always an argument with his father. Calder was actually terrified at the prospect of Callum muddying the Cramvik pure bloodline. Callum was glad to be going out of the country for a while as there was a recent scandal. Callum had embarrassed the family and was glad to be leaving to let things cool off. So that is our hero. And a hero is never good without a best friend. So we have Dader Kaz, or Kaz. Um, Deleuze Kaz, also known as Kaz, was a dragon kin from the Blue Sapphire clan. Or we're going to call them Dragon Bloods, just because I don't want to use the same terminology, but he's basically like a walking dragon with no wings. So, pretty much. Okay. So he was a dragon blood from the Blue Sapphire clan. Little is known about Kaz, even to his closest companions. He was the son of a merchant, but never had an interest in continuing the family business at this point in time. He lived for adventure and honor. Kaz liked a good fight and was quick to start and finish one when given the chance. He was not one for words and preferred to settle things honorably in battle. Sometimes he would bring up his clan and how they had lost their traditions and transformed into merchants. A little disgruntled. Kaz was brave, strong, mysterious, short tempered, and outspoken. Being a blue dragon, he was already intimidating, just by appearance and size, but he also had an intimidating stare, just like a large dragon. Victims of this stare felt that their very soul was being opened for view, making them unsure of themselves and sometimes frightened. Aside from Kaz's intimidating stare and short temper, he was loyal and very strong. Kaz was also a very skilled hunter and enjoyed trying new types of food and wine and ale while traveling. To his adventure companions, Kaz almost seemed kind, which was a rare quality for blue dragon bloods. So there's the BFF. And then every party needs their storyteller, comic relief, and musician. This is one of this guy's based off my husband's character. Possibly one of my all-time favorite characters anyone has ever played. So I tried to keep him as pure as my husband played him. However, there is a trick and a riddle with him. So pay attention to Abdul because he is not at all what he seems. Abdul Aliriez Aziz, performer extraordinaire, hailed from the Kwanzaa tribe of the western sands of Shaka, aka Abdul, was a sight for sore eyes. He was very appearance impressed all who saw him. Abdul was dressed in the finest attire, usually outfitted with black silk robe, gold stars, and a large feather black hat, a black leather belt with a large gold buckle, and always polished leather shoes and black gloves with stars on each hand. Abdul resembled what one would think a young adult elven type. It was obvious that Abdul was elven in some nature. His ears were much longer than the typical human, and his skin was dark like fine warm ale. His eyes were wide amber, which led many to believe that maybe he was three-fourths elven, with one parent being a darker elf and the other a mountain elf. Abdul had what was called a silver tongue. He could reason with ruffians, leprechauns, and even the eldest of dragons. Abdul's music was soothing. The talented little bard enjoyed performing almost as he did learning about new things. Abdul was a mysterious creature. He was private for his own life. However, he wanted everyone to know about everyone else and everything imaginable in the world of Tulusia. Abdul was a historian or author, so to speak. He had written tales for hundreds of years, although he would never tell his age, nor could anyone guess. Abdul never spoke of his heritage, just as he hailed, just that he hailed from the Kwanzaa tribe of the western sands of Shaka. In fact, the western sands of Shaka were as the deadly desert. Only a handful of hardly temporary. Oh, we gotta start that over. In fact, the western sands of Shaka was a deadly desert with only a handful of hardly temporary inhabitable oasis like areas. Not to mention the dragons. The dragons had been there a long problem in Shaka. Although there were not many known dragons in Shaka, there were more in the western sands of Shaka. Dragons tended to slumber for hundreds of years at a time. The dragons found comfort in the high desert mountains and the warm desert caves, which were abundant in the western sands. These mountains and caves would attract the warmer dragons, such as the red, the gold, the yellow, and the brown. The tribe of Kwanzaa was unknown, yet many thought and assumed would be a wandering desert tribe that traveled from oasis to oasis making camp. Abdul loved the mystery and thought it was fun for others to guess, and laughed at their silly guesses. So that is Abdul. And then we have to have our beautiful, mysterious, and deceptive leading lady, right? So we have Criswin Margrave. The Margraves were a long time running or ruling noble family of Halsgraf, the northern district of Halfir. Although the Margraves were not particularly liked by their countrymen, they were respected out of fear. The Margraves had a long past with rumors of dark forces, unnatural longer lives, odd features for humans, and the disappearance of many undesirables within their district limits. Being that the mountains were too harsh for everyday folk to pass, only those with magical or financial means could have left Halsgraf from the south. Much was not known about Halsgraf's origins. It was a quaint but large town of over 300 residents, mostly humans and dwarfs. There were several dwarven settlements north of Halsgraf and several barbarian villages. Trade was plentiful and the town was well guarded. The Margraves had always ensured safety with the price of loyalty. Lord Hammond Margrave, the legitimate ruler of the district of Halscroft, after some strange and rather brash and violent behavior, the lord had not been seen in over 17 years. He was said to be taken with a sickness and not well to come out into daylight. His wife Tana, or the Lady Tana, ensured that order was met, and the lord allegedly managed the district from his fortress at night. During this time, Lady Tana had been with child, When the child was born, it was a bit of a scandal as the child appeared to be half elven. Lady excuse me, Tana herself was human, as was Lord Hamad. The child's name was Criswin and was given the last name of Margrave. As the child became older and matured, it was apparent that indeed Criswin was half elven, and Lady Tana had had an affair with a traveling merchant who was an elf. This was a scandal. However, lucky for Lady Tanda, the Lord Margrave was out of commission and sick at the time. Criswin grew up to be beautiful, bold, outspoken, and very curious. She had long hair that was the color of an old blonde oak tree. Her eyes were light gray, and her skin was of the color of a glowing moonlight. Criswin often wondered what the outside world had to offer, and was curious to find her father and to learn of her elven heritage. Feeling trapped within the fortress, one fateful evening Criswin climbed out her window and went out into the wintry and dangerous forests of Grom. She did not make it far when misfortune struck. A family of wolves had traced her scent. They waited until she was tired to make their move. The slopes were steep, and Criswin became tired quickly. The wolves attacked, the mother wolf first, with a sharp, quick bite on Criswin's thigh to immobilize her. This followed a swift pounce from the father wolf onto Criswin's back. The wolf scratched her as he pushed her to the ground, playing with Criswin as he prepared himself to make the killing strike. She cried out to the gods, but they did not answer or assist Criswin. The wolf bit into the back of Criswin's neck, and she began sobbing. As she sobbed, begging Nagi, the god of death, to take her quickly. She instead felt the bite sink into her neck, and the sharp pain of her neck bone breaking within the wolf's jaws. Criswin wanted to scream, but could not. Just when all hope seemed lost, the demon Creedril, servant of Megusa, appeared. The appearance of the large demon frightened the wolves off. The demon quickly slung the young woman over his shoulders and disappeared from the forest of Grom into the Fey domain. Within the Fey domain, Criswin swore allegiance to the self-proclaimed goddess and mistress of magic, Megusa. Criswin devoted herself to Megusa's teaching, and for 100 years of time in the Fey domain, she remained Megusa's devoted servant. After 100 years of her studies had passed, Megusa released the young warlock Criswin to go find Megusa's only son, Sir Bodek. Strangely, although 100 years had passed in the Fey domain, only 1 year had passed in Tulusia. Hmm. Okay. And then every party needs their Boy Scout, right? Their goody goody compass of reason. So, let me turn myself up a little bit here. We have Father Stephen of Hodus. Hodus is the god of strength, shields, eggs, um, dragons. Lots of farmers and things revere him for eggs and that kind of good thing. Good solid folk. So Father Stephen of Hodus was an abnormally tall man with blonde, almost white hair, light crystal blue eyes, and light complected. He was slender but muscular. He had a kind face, and his appearance was welcoming. First look, it was apparent that Father Stephen was a holy man and worshipped Hodus, the god of strength, shield, and eggs. So, warriors, farmers, bird people, dragons, that kind of thing. Excuse me. Hodus was a lesser god and not one of the main pantheon. However, In areas of agricultural and dragons revered Hodus to be their chosen god. Many agricultural areas would have temples even in areas that worshipped Atatan. In areas that were primarily Atatanian were militaristic, and they believed that worshipping Hodus would benefit their shields and the protection of the egg was or wait shields and the protein of the egg they saw as their strength and an asset to military. Rewrite that. Although clerics and priests of Hodus were seen as lessers, they were still revered higher than women in other races. Father Stephen and his acolyte were the only living known survivors of an expedition hired by Magitha to find her son Serbatic. The adventuring party ended up in utter disaster. Father Stephen was rendered unconscious, and his acolyte Nicholas Barry was scarred. Excuse me. Nicholas Acolyte Nicholas Barry had pulled him out of a fireball, shielding him with his body, and drug him out of a ruined temple, saving Father Stephen's life. When Father Stephen awoke, he was informed by his acolyte that everyone in the party, including Serbatic, had perished. Oops. Unable to cope with the disaster, Father Stephen then went to his hometown to meditate in Halfir, in solitude, until he was called by his god to serve again. Once more. Okay, so now we have Acolyte Nicholas Barry of Hortus. Was chosen by Father Stephen to be his loyal acolyte and assistant. And the truth is, they became more than acolyte and teacher. Nicholas looked at Stephen as a father figure, and Stephen revered Nicholas higher in his heart than any other person, including his own family. When disaster struck, Nicholas instinctively shielded Stephen's body from a fireball. This maimed and destroyed Nicholas's body. Nicholas was once an attractive man and was at the age of 16. Young man, or teenager, actually, is what we would consider, but fantasy terms, he was a young man. Nicholas was now maimed and body destroyed. Burns all over his body and the dense dips where the flesh had been melted from the fire. His devotion to his mentor was not met without reward. Nicholas, never mind, Stephen vowed to take care of Nicholas and to never put him in peril. When Stephen awoke, he released Nicholas of his vow. However, Nicholas would not accept. Father Stephen wanted Nicholas to go home to the Barry farm and to lead a fruitful life. Nicholas, however, wanted to stay with his mentor and refused. His dedication and resilience proved to Stephen that Nicholas would one day become a great cleric for Hodus, whatever. We'll figure that out. I think I like Hodus better. Anyways, hey, you're fine, you're fine, you're fine. Prior to the destruction that rendered Stephen unconscious and maiming Nicholas's body, Nicholas was a handsome young man with deep black hair, brown eyes, muscular, tall, and very capable of melee combat. After the fireball incident, Nicholas was bald. His skin, one side, was slightly. Nicholas was bald. His skin was once slightly tan, was spotted with burns and dips, where the skin had melted. His face was discolored and half burnt, one side showing the man he once was. Nicholas dressed in all black, with a hood and long sleeves and gloves, showing no skin. He bared the tabard of Hodus on the front, and dedicated his studies and morning rituals to melee combat and the study of healing magic. He believed he was chosen to be a battle cleric for Hodus. Nicholas had came from a large family from the Isle of Bixton. His family had lived there for generations and had been one of the first farms on the island that supplied a mass amounts of food to miners, sailors, and merchants when they came to the island. Nicholas had 12 brothers and 2 sisters. He was the third oldest of all the children. Coming from a big family, he did not find it important to seek out individual attention. He was used to mix in with the group. When Father Stephen and his companions visited the berry farm for provisions, the berries essentially donated Nicholas to Father Stephen's service, as they are loyal worshippers of Hodus, and they felt it necessary to give their son as a, what are they called? Uh, Provision carrier and caretaker of their animals. Father Stephen had never originally intended Nicholas to face any danger or even become an acolyte. However, Nicholas proved himself by stepping up and saving the day on multiple occasions. He was headstrong, good with directions, and able to decipher maps. He had a skill with a mace, and Father Stephen saw it was the will of Hodus that this young man would become a cleric. So that is our main group, or party, so to speak. So, got a little bit of everything. And this is the end of our second installment. So, keep listening. It's going to get better. This is pure raw, like from my first typing. So, you can see how sometimes it gets a little edgy. But I can correct it as we do this. So, that is great. So, thanks again.